So, anyways, we just finished leveling in Feralus, and people on stream asked. We were talking about Blizzard's updating retail, actually, of all things. We normally talk about classic and stuff like that, but Blizzard, according to Bellular, is revamping Azeroth, the world, and he's got a bunch of evidence. And I mentioned to people that I watched a little bit of this earlier, and he does actually bring forth some compelling evidence. And Bellular is one of those people that he definitely has some contacts at Blizzard. Like, he's more in the know than a lot of other people. A lot of other people that like to pretend that they're in the know. He is definitely somebody that, has his kind of foot in the door or his ear, against the wall type of thing. So I watched a little bit of it earlier, and he talks about some updates. And I think it was kind of funny that we had talked about this because I was leveling in Feralus, and Feralus was a zone back when I first started streaming, back way before Classic Vanilla was ever even dreamed of. I was playing Warlords of Draenor. That's when I started streaming, and I used to rant like you would not believe that the trees in Feralus looked absolutely terrible, and they needed like a bit of a makeup done, or they needed to basically revamp and redo a lot of these graphics. And it was around this time, or maybe a little bit later, when people started coming up with videos about what World of Warcraft would look like in Unreal Engine 4. And now you're starting to see videos of what World of Warcraft would look like in like Unreal Engine 5. And some people, the graphics just really aren't, their style, their thing type of thing. I personally think that some of the graphics that they've done are unreal. Like, I look at it and it's like, you know what? If they ever came out with that in retail, I would maybe have to give that a shot, because it would kind of add a sense of realism, some really cool graphics, kind of along the lines of like Asheron's Call, or not Asheron's Call, Anarchy, Ashes of Creation. I'll get it. That the graphics just look spectacular, and it's like, you know what? Maybe I'll try this for a month until I get bored of it. Anyways, so let's watch Bellular's video on the revamping of graphics that they're doing in Azeroth, it looks like.
Warcraft 1.
Oh, and by the way, when Dragonflight was first announced, I did not think much of it, but one of the things that I really liked about Dragonflight was that they were bringing the game back to Azeroth. And to me, that was really important. I didn't like that they were always off on these, they were off on this other planet and stuff like that. Like, bring the game back to Azeroth and bring it back to being an actual role-playing game type of thing. And that was one of the few things about Dragonflight that I actually kind of intrigued me, that and bringing back the talent system. I still haven't played it and don't plan on it, but it was one of the things that I thought of.
Released November 1994. World of Warcraft.
I remember when that came out, and I played the day this came out.
Released
I played beta, actually.
November 2004. That's a decade. Dragonflight was released last November, and if the next expansion has the same release window, then it will drop November 2024. That's the 10th expansion, releasing on WoW's 20th anniversary and the franchise's 30th. So no doubt Blizzard are planning something big. But what if I told you there's already tons of evidence that has masked? What could celebrate the 30-year legacy of Azeroth more than rebuilding her from the ground up?
So what was he said? Kata came out 20 years after the original Orcs and Humans Warcraft game, right? So Orcs and Humans, 1994, World of Warcraft, 2004, Cataclysm, 2014. Is that what he said?
Up. With today's sponsor. Squarespace.com/Bellular Gaming, the place to get yourself set up on the web. I mean, man, been in the middle of setting up a bunch of things, changing some things on our job site, and that is where, man, their super user-friendly editor and their award-winning templates have just been absolutely clutch. It lets me get the design work that I need to get done super, super quick. I mean, there's nothing worse than being on a really tight timeline, struggling to get things to work, and that is why Squarespace just works. Their site builder is just so easy to use regardless of your past experience, and they've got so many great features like memberships, e-commerce, handling your mailing list. They really do democratize.
Sorry, Bellular, I don't have time to listen.
my way. Ones that well, person who is looking if they allow you know.
Let's fast forward.
Build your
Sorry.
For Flash, Bellular
If you're interested in Squarespace, Bellular Gaming is your code. Okay, there we go.
Did you notice? I mean, did you actually feel it? Sure, Lorthamar and Thalissa are married, but you'd think we'd see more change in a world that's moved on 5 years since we last saw it before we went to the Shadowlands. You look out at Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdoms, and you see a world that should be different after 12 years of advance.
Belfast on YouTube. Maybe that's why they bought the game studio with 100 devs from Proletariat, the makers of Spellbreak, to work on WoW. It could be. I mean, you know what? Like, I honestly think that if Blizzard's going to do this, they need to make it. They need to put it on a new engine. Like, that is one of the things that has always been terrible for World of Warcraft. Is the engine is absolutely terrible. Like, they don't have any idea how to build engines in today's gaming, market, and they showed that with Overwatch 2. Like, they had to basically scrap PvE because they just can't get it to work. Whereas, if they used another engine that was properly designed for that type of a game, and then just imported their graphics, they could get it to work. But imagine, like, if you're an Overwatch 2 player, which I'm not. I've never played Overwatch at all. But if you're like a big fan of Overwatch, how crushed you would have been to hear that they're not bringing PvE, because you would think that it's such a simple thing to add to the game. But Blizzard just can't figure this stuff out.
Advancement since the Cataclysm, but it still burns with those fires. Outside of Stormwind and Orgrimmar, very little in the world has actually changed. Like, did you know that Durotar now needs to import its water from Mulgore because the goblins in Ishara have polluted the local water?
Those damn
what
goblins,
would
man.
orc shamans think about that? Or places like Ashenvale, the Barrens, and the Plaguelands. Surely, after everything we've done for the Cenarian Circle, Earthen Ring, and the Silver Hand, these places are a little bit more back to normal. Hell, even the Orc Heritage planted a seed for that. The player helps plant the first few trees of a new forest in Thunder Ridge. All this seems ethereal, but we in fact know that we are going to see at least some of these events in-game. Steve Denuser said as much in his official statement on the time skip. Here it is. Reclaiming Gilneas won't be seen in lore books or locked behind time passing. It's something we're going to experience in-game. So maybe we don't need to feel the time skip immediately. Maybe it is something for when we return from the Dragon Isles. It would be a significant job for Blizzard to rebuild Gilneas. And then, of course, you look out the old world.
There's people already that are not in the Dragon Isles. Like, I'm sure if you went into Orgrimmar right now, you would see people.
And you realize the magnitude of revamping all 40 original zones. And that's not including the likes of High.
It would, like, this is the kind of the point I was talking about earlier, is the magnitude, like, he's getting into now, of revamping all the zones. I was going off about Feralus before and how terrible it looked, even by WoD standards, when I was going on these rants and saying, you know, if they're going to continue on this path of updating graphics and stuff like that, they need to look at, like, the trees in Feralus. Like, they look absolutely terrible by today's standards. Again, for Classic, I'm fine with it. But for retail, where they're trying to update the graphics and make the game look good for players that are really into that sort of thing, if they're going to revamp the zones, Feralus is one that definitely is in dire need of a makeover.
Ejal or Uldum. Huge job, right? Well, this is where we kick into gear, because they wouldn't be able to do it all in one production cycle. They would probably need to build this up over several expansions. Looking back, the first major signs of this were in Battle for Azeroth. That is when Blizzard got to grip.
Let's also be honest, one of the reasons why it would take them so long is because of the crappy engine that they're building the game on. Like, if you were to look at other games that are built on proper engines, they can develop zones in a hurry. I'm not talking minutes or anything like that, but 2 years, yeah, they could probably build a world that, you know, like Kalimdor and Eastern Kingdoms or something like that. Like, they could probably revamp that in 2 years, I have no doubt, relatively easily.
grips with what it would take to revamp a zone. And they actually did that in Arithai Highlands and Darkshore with the Warfronts. That's content back then in BFA, but also test beds for the realities of bringing zones into the modern era. There wasn't much in the way of structural change, but they took Stromgarde and they made it into a modern alliance fortress, bringing a relic of war.
When did they do this? Like, I haven't played retail in so long. Like, when did this happen? Did this happen in BFA or something?
Craft 2 into the Fourth War. Blizzard then wrestled with some of the game's oldest content, giving Arathai Basin and Warsong Gulch a full facelift. They look gorgeous now. Hell, they casually scarred Tirisfal, plagued the Undercity, and burnt Teldrassil down.
BFA,
they know how to work in their old zones. Throughout these updates, the amount of potential asset reuse for a...
You know what? I've not even played the new Warsong Gulch. Like, I know they've redone Warsong Gulch, and I remember when I saw the renderings of it, or even maybe gameplay, I thought, you know what? That actually doesn't look too bad. It looks kind of interesting.
Full world revamp has got completely insane, and most people haven't noticed this.
Like, I personally would like to, like, I don't know that I would care because I'm not really looking to play retail. But if they were to bring the old zones back to the way they were, but with the updated models and stuff like that, I wonder if that would be such a bad thing.
Warlords of Draenor brought Orc and Draenei architecture into the modern world.
Never played Turtle WoW.
Legion gave us Val'sharah, a vision.
Once and for all, I've been asked about Turtle WoW several times tonight. No worries, handsome. But I am not interested in playing any form of a private server where there's changes to Fresh Classic. Unless it's like true vanilla, I'm not at all interested in playing Turtle WoW at all.
Of what a modern Ashenvale could be. Battle for Azeroth was so filled with classic feeling assets that you would be able to, using those, rebuild the likes of Stormwind, Gilneas, Undercity, any troll zone, or any desert zone. That all locked into place with the Dragon Isles, because the Isles are full of HD remodels of old world NPC fodder like gnolls, furbolgs, and centaur. So imagine if they also did kobolds. There you go, Elwyn Forest could be full of new bad guys. We also could, if you wanted to extend systems, have renowned tracks with updated Felwind, furbolgs, after our time perhaps, learning things with the Winter Belt. Now, we then have both the story and the assets for, let's say, a united Centaur horde coming out of Desolace to lay waste to Thunderbuff. Now that all sounds kind of compelling, but that's just the stuff we're seeing in-game. And that's why it's time to check out the stuff that Blizzard haven't put in the game, but have actually made.
Uh-oh.
This is when things turn almost from a theory to potentially something that's actually going to happen. Seriously, just look at this stuff for a second and let your imagination run away. Check out what a HD retextured Elwyn could look like. Here is the Goldshire Inn.
I mean, we've seen what a retextured or developed Elwyn Forest can look like. We've seen it in Unreal Engine 5, and I don't want to say overwhelmingly. There are people that just do not like the way the graphics look on Unreal Engine 5, but keep in mind, those were usually done by one person. Like, one person basically redid Elwyn Forest by himself, and considering it was a one-man team, did a pretty damn good job. If you had a team of Blizzard employees doing it, and like somebody mentioned earlier, that Blizzard just took over another company that had 100 developers that they basically just swallowed up. And if they actually know how to use this type of, Unreal Engine and stuff like that, or put them towards the task, imagine what a team of 100 Blizzard employees could do. Probably almost as much as that one individual. Probably.
The house beside the Crystal Lake, barnyards, windmills, lumber mills, mines. These one-to-one scale with the assets that exist as is in the world, and they could be placed without even having to move NPCs about. Literally, swap them over.
Again, I don't know how to use Unreal Engine, but I am fairly certain, I've asked this question of someone that knows how to use Unreal Engine, but I believe Blizzard can just take their models and basically input it into Unreal Engine, and it would look like Blizzard models. So yes, games like Ashes of Creation and stuff like that look different because the models that are being used in the game are being developed by the Ashes of Creation team, but Blizzard's game in Unreal Engine 5 would look totally different because they would look more cartoony and stuff like that.
They're labeled is also fascinating. Check out these human and orc assets. This is base building stuff, walls, towers, and gates. Each is labeled Expansion 9, which is actually the one that we're in, but each file ends with a 10 and then the race's name. Remember that Expansion 9 is game version 10, right? And it gets more intriguing then when we look at the Night Elf stuff that we're finding in the patch 10.1 PTR. There seems to be pretty clear math here. Masses of old world assets are being made. They're being put into the game files. They're in the game build, but they're just not in Azeroth. They're not in the game. Maybe they'll all be used this expansion, like these Blood Elf interior decorations. These ultimately, they've got us a little bit excited, but it turns out that they were, at least for now, just used for the Horde side of the Dragonscale expedition. But the thing is, if Silvermoon was to get an update, this stuff is exactly what you'd put in it. And there's more. This is the thing that really nailed it for me. Check out, right, this data-mined Ironforge guard. What's up with him? If they're updating our guards specifically with the emblem of...
You know what, I like Classic, but as far as retail goes, stuff like this is kind of cool. I like...
Ironforge.
Just kind of the added detail that you can see in that sort of stuff, as long as it stays kind of in the general tradition of what WoW caricatures look like, it actually does look pretty sick, doesn't it? So like if they were going to revamp retail, this type of stuff would actually look really cool. I'm really hoping that they do revamp retail. And again, I'm known as a classic player. I play vanilla. That's my very favorite version of the game. I don't hate retail. I hate retail in the sense that I don't enjoy it. I want to enjoy it though. I would love to be able to go back and say, you know what? I'm really enjoying retail now. Like I would love to see that. But I think Blizzard's motives in retail are so vastly different than what they were when they originally created vanilla. Like, it's pretty clear that in retail, they're out to get as much money as they possibly can. There's all these, mounts and store games, the token, all that sort of stuff. I would really love to be able to like the retail version of the game, though. So Classic WoW with retail asset? No, Ice Assassin. This is what Bellular is suggesting, that Blizzard is possibly preparing to revamp all the graphics in retail for the next expansion. He's hinting that this could very well happen.
In the shield and the tabard for players, surely they want to update our cities, right? So that's what we're actually seeing.
It would look weird if they updated just the guards and not everything else. That does make sense.
But one thing above all else points toward a revamp: the world itself. The story is ready to advance. Azeroth is just crying out for a revamp, and we'll start where Blizzard have actually pointed to some action being, and that is Lordaeron. It was the heart of so much of what Warcraft once was. The Seven Kingdoms, Arthas Menethil, High Elves, but now it's a wasteland left to time. The big one is Gilneas. Genn was in the spotlight throughout Legion and BFA. He's now a major advisor to the Alliance, but he's also a king of a kingdom. His next arc will be acting like one and reclaiming his land. And we even have a decent idea of how it will play out. The Forsaken have retreated from Gilneas. They're licking their wounds after the Fourth War and all of that madness, but there is still trouble brewing. Ivar Bloodfang and his pack have taken Shadowfang Keep and jealously guard its evil artifacts. The pack are now so feral, Matthias Shaw worries how they will even remain our allies. In Silverpine and Tirisfal.
I'm not gonna lie, I actually forget Worgans are in retail. When I saw them, I was like, oh, those are the werewolf NPCs. I was like, wait a second, no, there's actually where you can actually play Worgans.
The Forsaken, once a cult of personality to Sylvanas, now find themselves without their leader. And of course, with a lot of justifiable guilt over the war. There's a new council set up to lead them into the future, but there is potential for some strife and story there, especially over Kalia being on that council. The one thing they unanimously agree on, though, is that the Forsaken deserve a home. But Lordaeron doesn't belong to just the Forsaken. Humanity is making a comeback. The Scarlets have been spreading propaganda. I believe patch 8.1 of BFA added this, and it's not been picked up on much since. So their propaganda, which was in some leaflets that you found in-game, they talk about having a true living heir to the Menethil dynasty in hiding. They will be back. They've been set up to return, but they don't seem like much of a grand military order as they were in the past. They're perhaps more fringe conspiracy people. And they aren't the only humans on the scene. By now, with the Silver Hand and Cenarian Circle working on it since vanilla, you'd really think the Plaguelands wouldn't be so plagued anymore. If we see an update there, it might even go back to being called the Eastweald. Of course, there are still some remaining Scourge warlords and dark whispers of necromancy coming out of Scholomance. This is all stuff told to us in exploring Azeroth, but finally seeing the results of our efforts would be a huge moment in WoW. And if you want a bigger moment for, I don't know, a cinematic reveal, the Silver Hand have attempted to reclaim Stratholme several times since Legion. And with its history...
Did I read somewhere that's, was it Strat or something? One of the dungeons has been removed from retail, like the vanilla version, like you can no longer play it or something? Something recently I saw. I think it was Mr. GM had mentioned or something. If it wasn't him, sorry, I don't mean to give you crap, Mr. GM, I'm not.
It would be the perfect place to tell new stories for non-Stormwind humans. Arthas' damage undone, that kind of thing. But as much as humanity may be getting a free ride with Gilneas and resettling the Plaguelands, the real biggest player in the region is Silvermoon. Since it was sacked by Arthas in the Third War, they've long been on the road to recovery. But now, Silvermoon has been united with Suramar, creating twin elven kingdoms that could very much decide the future of Horde politics and establish what post-war Azeroth could look like. We're seeing new generations of Blood Knights and Magisters come along, like Solandria, once a regular of Children's Week in-game, now a fully fledged light-swinging paladin. Which brings me to perhaps the most exciting aspect of a revamp. Vanilla launched with many young people in the lore, but other than Anduin, we've seen very few of them grow up. And one of those youths that I think most players have completely forgotten about is about to come of age and wield about as much power as Anduin does, and that is Dagran Thessarian II, who is the heir to the united dwarven kingdoms of Khazmodan. The gateway to the north is Khazmodan, the mountain kingdoms of the dwarves. But it's no longer just the Bronzebeards in charge. Magni's daughter, Moira, was captured by Dagran Thessarian I, and when we turned up to liberate her, we discovered they were actually in love, and Moira had a son. That son is now the rightful king of the Dwarven Kingdoms, and when he comes of age, which is going to happen in 2 to 3 game years, he will replace the Council of the Three Hammers and become the king of Ironforge.
You know, all this lore that he's talking about would be funny if Blizzard developers are watching this going, oh, wait a second, we didn't think about that. That's actually part of the story, isn't it? Kind of like the red shirt guy that used to go to BlizzCon all the time.
Airy Peak and Shadowforge City. And no, Blizzard have not forgotten him because he just made an appearance in the story of Lorthamar and Thalystra's wedding, having become good friends with Arator, who of course is the son of Turalian and Alleria. Now, with the Dark Irons now fully in the Alliance, it will actually be an unprecedented time of peace for the dwarves. We may even have Shadowforge City, or as we know it, Blackrock Depths, but not full of enemies. Now that sure would be a change to witness. Then, not to forget what's...
Man, I don't know how I'd feel about that. Like, such an iconic zone. in not being able to actually like do the instance. I guess maybe I don't know. Are the instances still available in retail?
Of Shadowforge City, Azeroth's most iconic peak, Blackrock Mountain. It is mostly known by players as where we go to defeat Nefarian. Twice, once in Vanilla, once in Cataclysm. But now, there are some remnants of the Dark Horde. Other than that, it lies quite empty. This is the perfect location then for black dragons returning from the Dragon Isles to basically right some of their family's wrongs. Rathian could even sit on the mountain and watch over his best friend, Anduin, over his city, right? Watch over Stormwind. But really, when it comes to the Eastern Kingdoms, we know much of the lore that's going to drive the story, that it's going to be Stormwind, and it's not as rosy as you may expect.
Not as rosy.
Poured
What,
its
does it
heart
survive?
and soul
It
into
doesn't
the
get
forefront.
destroyed?
It got to the point where they needed to call up peasants from Westfall and send them to the front line. And then they paid the ultimate price. Their king was taken away by the jailer. And he still has not returned. Crazy when you think about it, but yeah, from the perspective of people in Stormwind, Anduin's not been there for 5 years. Turallion, he's a nice guy, right? Well, we certainly hope so, because he is effectively the reigning king. In patch 925, Greymane and Shaw, in a private moment, shared their concerns about what that could mean. Will he be a just king? Could his faith cloud his judgment? They seemed to pull back on that a little bit with the introduction to Dragonflight, but there still are breadcrumbs of future strife if Blizzard wants it. Okay, say he just gives the throne right back to Anduin when Anduin returns to us. Well, our golden boy is not going to be the same as when he left. His trauma response was to basically pawn his duties off and wander alone until he figures his shit out. His return will be a happy one, but it's one that will bring its own tension, and we have to question what darkness will linger in Anduin, or even how people will feel about his abdication. That's a big A-plot story thing. But what we really want from a world revamp is to see what's going to go on in those old-school human zones. And Blizzard sort of got the ball rolling. After the Human Heritage quest, we know that Westfall's issues are mostly ironed out politically. Anduin pardoned the Stonemasons, and Van Cleef disbanded the old gang and disavowed the remaining Defias' ways. But the remnants of that new Defias are pure, unjustified bandits and pirates. And yeah, pirating they'll do. We have the Night Squall, who is a mad night elf who wants to explore the other side of the planet, to sail beyond the Veiled
A lot
Sea.
of this lore I've never heard of
He's
before.
currently making a federation
I haven't been playing
of
retail.
pirates, and he wants to get the Defias on board. In Duskwood, a mysterious necromancer, free of the Helm of Domination, was destroyed by the Night Watch, but he promised he was only the beginning. That means that Raven Hill is not yet clear of undead. So, there will be plenty for us to do between the politics, the bandits, the gnolls, the kobolds, the murlocs, the necromancers, and really all sorts. We could see revivals and continuations of hundreds of stories that made those zones so memorable, but rebuilt as beautifully as the Dragon Isles themselves. Kalimdor has seen so much action in the last decade. Orgrimmar was sacked twice. Cthulhu had this whole area covered. Uldum was opened. Teldrassil burned. The Sword of Sargeras, and really the list goes on.
Is the sword still there? The sword's still there. Wasn't that a meme back in like BFA or in Shadowlands? The sword was still
The
there.
promise of a half-explored wilderness is still there. We know a dark power lies under Maradon, and it wants to unite the
What
Centaur
sword?
hordes, so they claim the entire continent. And we've got new Centaur models that Blizzard could use for that. Another big development is the Barrens, where the Mag'har teleported over from AU Draenor. And the crazy thing is, when they teleported over, several Botani were caught in that spell. When they arrived in Azeroth, they escaped to the overgrowth in the Northern Barrens, which is where the Emerald Nightmare was manifesting on.
This is one of the things that just triggers me like nothing else in Cata, is what they've done to a lot of the zones.
Azeroth. Isn't that a bit of a scary crossover? Just remember how in Warlords of Draenor we had to prevent a Botani invasion of Stormwind, and when you go into the deep lore of Draenor, we see that life unchecked can doom a planet.
Yeah,
The
1,000
west
Needles
coast
is
of
another
the
one
continent
too.
is littered with highborn ruins infested with Naga. And Nazjatar was not the end. And now we're hearing that they have a prophecy about Ashara's return that I covered in another video. Already, we have Centaur, Botani, and Naga to fight. But also, there are many Titan ruins that would be fantastic to re-explore, now that we found out that Odin wasn't necessarily truthful to us all the time. Like, life did not come from Ungoro Crater, but we were told that back in Wrath of the Lich King. What the hell then? What was Ungoro for? Even in Uldum, we know the Waste Wanderers settled there, so we'll have guides if we ever return. But all that is secondary to who really owns Kalimdor, the Orcs and the Horde. And the Orcs have some soul searching to do. As I mentioned earlier, the water in Durotar has become polluted by the goblins of Ashara. That is a political test for the Horde's new council. Instead of an orc war chief calling the shots and rolling heads, now it'll be a whole thing to resolve. This will be a problem throughout the continent as the various Horde factions divide Kalimdor up. But for a race who founded the Horde and then brought the other races in, the Orcs need some time in the light. Especially after the Orc Heritage Quest reunited the clans while still keeping them distinct, a revamp is a good time to explore those clans further. But the biggest iceberg on the horizon, something WoW's never really satisfied us on, is faction conflict. The Night Elves are still a power to be
I totally forgot that now you're able to like group with people of the opposite faction. Can you add each other to the same guild in the opposite factions now too? That's not a thing. Please, like they haven't done that, like gone that far, have they?
Reckoned with. They are in the process
Not
of
guild, just
growing
raid,
what seems to
okay.
be a new world tree, which could also mean a new city and a new place of power. Even if they don't end up in the same place of Teldrassil, why would they give up Darkshore? Why would they give up Ashenvale, where all their heritage lies? Surely then...
Wait, let's get this clear. Dylan, you can add each other to the guild or no? Was added this patch. Like... See, this is how I mean, like, retail has gotten so far away from Classic that part of what makes Classic fun is hating the other faction. You know, even though your friends are on the other faction, it's fun to kill them. You know, like...
could have conflict because the Orcs are still cutting down trees. Faction conflict might not be the A-plot going forward, but remember, conflict doesn't necessarily mean murdering each other.
Antisocial contract?
Could just be
I think I just signed something saying that I wouldn't actually hate anyone in the game, right? I think that's what they have you sign.
Faction tension. You know what? Other MMOs, and sometimes even WoW, have done a pretty damn good job of writing a little political thriller when they really need to.
Let's be real.
Let's be real for a...
See, when he says that, let's be real for a minute, like, it's almost hinting, like, real, like Unreal Engine? Maybe not.
Where can World of Warcraft go next? Like, honestly. Obviously, the answer is many places. The Emerald Dream, the other side of Azeroth with all that Night Squall lore, the next cosmic realm, or perhaps the cosmos threats coming to us, which I think we would probably prefer. But really, a world revamp feels a bit evident. Every other day, somebody is finding a new data mined asset in
A world
game.
revamp would actually be pretty
There aren't
cool
many
in retail.
explanations for all of these files just yet. It could easily be something in the process of 11.0, a soft reset of assets rather than core story. Maybe they will just piecemeal create more and more old world assets over several patches or expansions. Maybe this stuff is actually for new faction fortresses on the other side of Azeroth, and that's why Blizzard have been building them, adding them to the game files, but not putting them in the world. I suppose the best part, though, is that it brings potential to us. We're in a good place right now. We're in a really great expansion. The world is kind of being reset in a nice, calm way. Anything can happen next, and it's all quite exciting. But the one thing that Blizzard knows will hit hardest, the thing that they can market, the one thing that could be sronger than any...
Belfast says, I don't think Blizz Games I don't think Blizz does games outside the proprietary engine. They want full control. You're probably right. I don't actually expect that they're going to switch to Unreal Engine 5. Do I think they could develop the game better than how they have been? I think you could argue that they could when you've seen that in other, other games that they've got. Overwatch 2 we mentioned earlier, they can't get some of the most basic things to work because I don't think that they actually I don't think their team knows how to develop stuff anymore. I think their team is no longer like the top tier of developers in the game. And after years and years and years of paying, cheap wages, it's now showing, it's become very evident with Blizzard that they are not very good at developing these types of games anymore. Whereas other games that are paying more in wages and bringing in better talent and stuff like that are just basically doing it better now.
Anything else for World of Warcraft in the public consciousness is to reclaim some part of the place that it once had in gaming culture as a whole. And the way to do that would be to say, World of Warcraft is back. The world is back. Experience Azeroth after 30 years of evolution, built with modern tools, modern tech, modern gameplay. That's the ticket. And I think...
I mean, the modern tools, they still use a crap engine. Like, this is what we're talking about, right?
They're sort of on their way to doing that. One way or another. So what do you think? Do you think we are in for a world revamp? Why do you think Blizzard are making these assets?
I think they have to do a revamp
all
eventually.
At once as a big new expansion like the Cataclysm? Or perhaps do you think Blizzard would slowly roll through the world as side content as they produce patches? Or perhaps do we have a situation where maybe one of the main continents just is where the next big expansion takes place? Maybe Yrel and her Lightbound army come through the Dark Portal, and as a part of that process, much of the Eastern Kingdoms gets to be revamped. I'm not 100% sure, but I think there's a lot of potential.
Would be kind of odd if they just did one continent, though, to be fair. It would be really odd, and I think they have enough time over a 2-year period to redevelop the world, like the two continents themselves. Some of it's already done, so... most game devs went into web dev. Those jobs have no overtime, less work, and same pay. Blizzard has been notorious for years and years and years to pay people like cheap wages because people looked at Blizzard as an opportunity to throw that on their resume to get a better job later on down the road. Blizzard took full advantage of that. I think over the years, it's kind of come back to bite them in the ass.
Making these assets, they've been making them for some reason, and right now 700 people, 700 plus,
700?
are working on World of Warcraft. I don't want to say that anything is possible.
Did we just get 7
a lot
on
more
Classic?
is possible than it used to be. And
7.
if, when talking about the resettlement of Gilneas, Steve Denuser said, "Oh no, that's the sort of thing we'd see in-game, not in a book," why would he have said that if they didn't plan on doing things of that scope in the game? I then say to you, when's the Undercity going to be fully fixed up? When are the Night Elves going to get their new city? When will Gilneas be reclaimed? I think these are all things that we will see in the game. The question then is, what else will come along with that? So, let me know what you think. Thank you for watching today's video. This just shows how the world is brimming with potential. I'll see you next time.
Well, we talked about it at the very beginning of the video. I personally don't play retail. I haven't played retail in years, but I was intrigued about Battle for Azeroth, Dragonflight, because they were bringing back talents. And I've been harping since WoD that they needed to do, like, in the retail version of the game, they needed to update the graphics in certain zones because it just looked weird with the newer graphics that they had in WoD and stuff like that, and then eventually in Legion, etc., etc. You'd go from, like a zone in WoD, and then suddenly go to Feralus, and you're like, wait a second, this looks absolutely, like, this doesn't even look like it's the same game anymore. So what are they doing? Bellular is suggesting that Blizzard may be redeveloping the entire Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor to update their graphics and stuff like that with new models, etc., etc. So not a for sure thing, but he's definitely suggesting it. I am in the opinion that it is definitely needed in the game. I think it's time. It's been time since WoD. Let's be honest. Some of the graphics look absolutely terrible, and you can't argue that there's certain things that they have added to the game graphics-wise in retail where it's like, oh, that actually looks kind of neat. That example of the guard by Ironforge, for example, that looked kind of cool. And if all the guards looked like that when you're wandering through town, that would look kind of cool. But it would look really weird if just the guards were updated like that and the rest of the city wasn't. You know, and then if you're going to update the city, well, as soon as you step out of the city, I mean, you got to update the zone there and et cetera, right? So it's like they've started updating a bunch of stuff, and it looks like there's a strong possibility that they could be updating the rest. Anyways, we don't watch a lot of Bellular videos on my stream anymore because he's mostly just talking about retail, and for the most part, we're not really playing any retail at all. So, but we used to watch a lot of Bellular videos back in the day. Good video by Bellular. Anyways, all the information will be down below. If you like my commentary and you're watching, please feel free to like and subscribe to my channel. It does help. Or you can talk to me on stream. I stream 5 or 6 days a week on Twitch and YouTube, dual streaming at the same time. So you can subscribe to this channel or jump over to Twitch. The links will be down below and we can talk there. Thanks a lot. We'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.